Shut up and sit down.
Hey everybody, it's the Takeover Tuesday podcast, and I'm David Allen, and I have a special guest here on the podcast today, someone I just had drinks with, in fact, about a week ago. He is a doctor, a sir, a reverend, and a cult leader, most of all, perhaps. Colin Theriot, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
Now, I first heard about you, which I told you last week. I first heard about you from some girl in a cafe, I think about 3 years ago almost, because I was talking to her, and she knew I was a copywriter into copywriting, and she said, "Have I heard of Colin Theriot?" And I said, "I really haven't." And at the time, I hadn't. And quickly, I came to learn that you had this small little Facebook group that has since taken over the Facebook world in regards to copywriting.
Yeah, that's true. Before then, I was very popular in cafes, though. Very well known at all the coffee establishments around the world.
By pretty girls, I might add, too. So you had that going.
Well, I mean, to be fair, ugly girls know who I am.
Now, let's go back a bit. I know, of course, your superhero origin story myself, but for those people who don't know how you came to run the biggest copywriting group on Facebook, maybe take us back to the beginning.
Sure. I'll keep it concise. I was doing sort of, I call it web monkey work, but it's basically like everything that the company needed for the website, whether it was graphics or, SEO or little snippets of writing or whatever. And some guys that worked at that company started this thing called StomperNet. That was like a huge internet marketing launch back in like 07, 08. And I just happened to be working there. Like I helped make the HTML on their launch page and stuff. And when the company took off, they sort of poached employees from this e-commerce store I was working at, and because there were so few of us, it was the sort of thing where there was more work to do than people to do it. So I can't remember. We had a writer on staff, and she was good, but she was more like content and PR type stuff. So I can't remember if it was that she was sick or she was just overworked, but basically like some stuff needed to get done, one of which was rewriting the sales letter, which I believe, depending on who you ask, either Frank Kern or Andy Jenkins wrote the original version, but my first copywriting job was to take that letter and then add in all the new junk that the company had added in to do a relaunch. And my boss at the time was Andy Jenkins, and he said, "This is pretty good, man. Do you like doing this?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's easy." He's like, "All right, well, you're the chief marketing copywriter now, so get good at it. That's your job."
Well, that's a good way to get started.
Yeah, so for a few years there, and like at this time, I want to point out, like I understood internet marketing, but the idea that a copywriter was like a thing you could do as a freelancer had just never occurred to me. I had no idea that this was even a thing. I just kind of presumed that, like me, all that stuff got written by some random person that worked at the company.
Right.
So,
right.
I did that for a few years. I wrote at the time I was there, I wrote almost all the blog posts, all the emails, at least a draft of all the sales letters. They had a lot of marketing guru type dudes there. So I won't say like the finished version was me and only me. Everybody had a chance to weigh in, but I wrote at least a draft of everything we published. And when that company kind of went sour due to disagreements in ownership, I decided to go freelance and hung up my shingle for a while. And a lot of the people I had known through StomperNet basically threw work my way, knowing that I was available. So it grew from there. I freelanced for a few years, but it was always my plan to sort of build my own audience that I could promote things to as a quote unquote guru, because like I had done it as a day job pretending to be someone else. But the trick was they had authority that I didn't have. So the idea when I went freelance is like, I'm going to do a few big name projects that I can brag about. say I wrote a few multi-million-dollar sales letters, and then parlay that into, here's why you should listen to me talk about copy. So that worked out pretty good, and I was just kind of farting around, spending too much time on Facebook at the time, and I had a Skype group for what became the Cult of Copy. But that was really small. I had like 30 people. It was just like professional peers and contacts. And Facebook groups were kind of new at the time. No one was really doing anything with it. Pages were the hot thing. So I just opened the group on Facebook with the idea that, like, now I can fuck around on Facebook all I want and not feel bad about it because I'm working.
Right.
And that worked out good. It grew to like in the thousands very early, and we're approaching 19,000 members now. Although a significant amount of them are Vietnamese spam account. But no, that's like the hot trend right now.
Yeah.
If you have a Southeast Asian name with like weird characters in it, like I try not to be a jerk about it. Like, I want
Right.
to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but like, guaranteed, if it's like some weird horse porn spam getting posted,
Yeah.
it's one of those accounts that I let sneak in. But fortunately, the group has been run in such a way where there's like a strong sense of community, so that stuff quickly gets, reported to me or flagged and deleted. But yeah, basically, I started the community as a way to let's see, like there were a lot of groups at the time that were sort of meant to be like, oh, hey, beginners, ask all your questions about marketing, and that just didn't interest me at all. So I wanted to create a group that was like peer based, people on the same level as me to discuss, day-to-day work activity type thing. So I started posting on that level, and I guess that really appealed to it appeals to newbies too, but it gave a lot of, talented, established, actual working professionals a place to talk shop. And I attribute a lot of its success to that it was, I didn't dumb it down. I didn't aim it at beginners. I ran it as a total meritocracy. So there was none of this, like, like a lot of groups have pages and pages of rules. And I feel like there's a certain kind of person that if you give them rules, their goal is to figure out how to do what they want in a
Right.
way that doesn't violate the rules,
Right.
while totally ignoring the spirit of why those rules are there. So what I did was, I have no rules other than, if I don't like it, I'm going to delete it, and if I don't like you, I'll ban you. But if you're cool, like some of the stuff most groups don't allow is like self-promotion. Well, if you're cool and awesome and you're giving value to the group, yeah, sure, I don't mind you being self-promotional. Like, comme ci, comme ça, as the
Yeah.
Cajuns say. So, like, it's one of those things. I've actually had one of my favorites is somebody was like, well, I don't know if you know Lawton Childs. He's here in Atlanta. He posted something that was self-promotional, and somebody was like, they posted something self-promotional too. I deleted theirs, and they're like, well, Lawton gets to post something. And I'm like, well, Lawton bought me lunch last week. So if you want to come to town and buy me lunch, we'll talk.
Right.
But yeah, it's like I ran it. Like, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, I had this genius master plan or anything. But if anyone believes the group has quality, it's because I used myself as the prototype of like who this group is for. And that meant, like, very low tolerance for beginner stuff, for spammy stuff, the kind of things that make other groups eventually get choked to death by their own size. I hopefully continue to avoid that despite the group growing larger every day.
Now, when you were first working for those, well-known marketers,
Yeah.
you saw, of course, their guru aura, if you will,
Yeah.
and decided to build one for yourself. Now, you told me a very interesting story about getting on stage when we were having drinks the other day there. Tell me about how you got on stage and how that instantly built authority in accordance, too, with your former bosses, making it
Right.
pretty well known that you were doing the writing.
Yeah. it's it's one of those things where like copywriting in particular as a field tends to get a lot of like shy, spotlight averse kind of people just because of the nature of the work. But because I had no aspirations of ever being a writer of any kind, like I didn't have that. It wasn't like a profession that I gravitated to because of my personality. So like I found it was very easy to find marketing events and get on stage as a copywriter because it's just not something many copywriters talk about. And the ones that do were like they tend to, you got to pay them a high speaker fee because they're well known and super well established. But I wasn't that yet, but I had a few projects that people were very familiar with that once I went freelance and I could come out publicly and say, hey, I wrote those, it would make it worthwhile for me to get on stage. So the way I did it was I had friends in the industry that I had worked for or worked with that whenever they would be speaking at an event, I would say, hey, who's the organizer? You should bug them and let them know that I speak about copywriting. If they have an opening or if somebody drops out, I plan on being at the event anyway.
Right.
So I did a lot of like stealth bullying of that kind to weasel my way onto a few stages. And really, like once you're on a stage, people just see you as a cut above. So like I'm not a copywriter. I'm so good at, like, people have this perception, it's just like TV. People have this perception like there's some high council authority that's like this guy, like we checked this guy out to make sure he was legit enough to go on stage, instead of it being like a guy who's like 10 grand in debt to put on the event and needs to sell tickets, and like two of the speakers pulled out the last week. So literally anyone who looks like they can do it will get put on stage if you know the right people. So I did that, and then I sort of like networked really well with the speakers at those events, and specifically I went to like the Warrior Forum had not turned into complete garbage at that time.
It wasn't
Like
a
it was,
cesspool that it's
I
become.
mean, it was a cesspool, but it was only ankle deep instead of nipple deep.
Right.
But it like those kind of events, and then like the whole like affiliate circle jerk, for lack of a better term, the whole like everybody's launching a new thing, all the affiliates get on board, there's like 50 launches a week. I looked at that as like those guys at that tier that, they're doing like $20, $100 products, were not really able to afford what I charged for copywriting, because I would charge 5-figure fees to write letters, but these were for 2 grand and higher products. So like the guys selling those, like I was cheap to them,
Yeah.
because if you sell like 5, I got paid, and the rest is yours. But these lower end guys couldn't afford that, but I knew they had the audience that needed someone like me to sort of be, hey, here's the source of how we learn how to do copywriting. So all the guys that taught like how to make your own info products, how to market your stuff online, those guys are basically like a geyser that spits out potential customers for me when it came to me being an info marketer rather than a service provider. So when I started creating how-to information, those were that was my potential audience. But by the time I started releasing product, I was well known enough in that space that people were asking me to do it. Like I figured the time to make a product is when people are like, dude, when are you going to make a product? And then that
Yeah.
that proves there's demand, and I'll sell at least one to that guy.
Yeah.
So I took it from there, and then like within the Cult of Copy group, I made trainings about all kinds of different aspects of copywriting based on templates that I had developed when I did it for a living. So like I said before, it was like a peer-to-peer kind of group. So the way my products are, it wasn't like, even your grandma can write copy. It was like, hey, these are my templates that I used to make it easy to serve my client. I'll just teach them to you, and you can use the templates. And here we are. I've done like 15 or so products like that. And then the audience that I have all sort of came from me speaking, and then I did like web shows for a while. I had a YouTube show.
Which is
Just
great.
sort of, yeah. The story I tell with the lesson with it is, like a few years back, you remember when Iceland had those volcanoes that
Yeah.
erupted and shut down air travel all over Europe? Well, like all the 24-hour news networks needed some volcano expert to come on and flap their lips about it to
Right.
fill airtime between commercials. So I'm sure what happened is some intern got assigned that task and they just Googled like volcano expert,
Right.
found the guy that looked like he was all over the place, and called that guy up. And he came on the air and he talked about volcanoes and he was competent. There's not anything like super challenging about that particular aspect of volcanoes. It's like, yep, there's ash. It gets in the clouds. Planes can't see. End of story. Like I knew enough about volcanoes as only a casual hobbyist
Right.
to deliver the same talk. But they wanted a guy with some kind of credentials that looked prominent online. Well, what I found out later was that like real volcanologists, which is what real
Right.
volcano scientists go by, know that guy as like he's just some harmless crackpot who his volcano research facility is his trailer that he lives in the middle of like the Arizona desert, thousands of miles from any active volcano. But he goes to their event and he's really into it. He's just like a fan
Yeah.
of
Super
volcanoes.
fan. Yeah.
But the trick is he doesn't research volcanoes. All he does is sit on the internet all day and write and talk about volcanoes. So he creates this material, and Google, being what it is, rewards the guy who doesn't shut the fuck up about that subject. So a real volcanologist is not doing that. They're publishing scientific papers and spending time in cinder cones and calderas and shit.
Right.
Meanwhile, this Looney Tunes guy is in his trailer tippity tapping away. And who's the volcano expert as seen on TV?
The guy in the trailer.
Right. So I figured if I can be the guy who doesn't shut the fuck up about copy, then eventually everyone's going to see me as the guy. And that worked really well considering like I've written between 12 and 20 sales letters in my short
Right.
freelancing career. I freelanced between like '09 and I retired from writing in like 2011. So like the goal was to do just enough of a copywriting quote unquote career to hang my reputation on. Because like you said, I was trying to manufacture
Yeah.
this guru aura. So it's like I've seen that guy on stage. He's got a YouTube channel. I've heard him talk on podcasts. He writes a lot of articles about copy. That guy must be the guy. And then once I got to that point, and I'm like getting hired to critique sales letters that the product owner can't afford to hire me to write it, but they'll hire me to critique it. So now I'm getting famous as the guy who like gives you the thumbs up on whether your launch is going to be okay. And then once you're in that advisory position where some other writer is told by his boss to do what you're telling him to do, like then you're like an Uber copywriter, like a step above everybody else.
All right.
You're like the copywriter's copywriter. And the thing is, like, some people are like, oh, you haven't paid your dues, or learn the ropes, and you don't have like a 30-year long career writing for all these different subscription things. I'm like, yeah, but I did write a few sales letters that sold like $12 million worth of stuff. So, I mean, all I'm saying is maybe you don't need that kind of lengthy career to actually write copy. So I try and make it like a workmanlike approach. Like it's not art. Like you're not writing literature, you're a hack.
Right.
And like formulas work, and maybe a $40,000 copywriter can really knock it out of the park for you. But when you can't afford that guy, chances are you as the business owner will be able to do a better job if you can get the structure right than any low-level copywriter you might hire, simply because you have the experience and the knowledge of like the customer profile and the products and the competition that guy is going to have to do like tons of research, and you're not paying him enough to do good research. So like if you can write decently well, I can teach you the structure of copywriting, because basically like that's how I had to learn it. Like I said, I didn't know shit about copywriting. They're like, rewrite this letter. So I broke it apart into pieces so I could understand the shape of it and the order of the arguments being made. And then I found out, well, if you just take out the name of the product here and talk about,
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's a
It's
story structure.
formulaic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like obviously Hollywood does that all the time. They have their same basic story formula. The identity of who the hero is and who their mentor is and who the villain is change, but the structure is pretty identical. I mean, Harry Potter is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like you're an orphan. You're destined for things bigger than living under the stairs or forming moisture on some bunghole planet at the edge of the galaxy. Turns out you're magical and special in the entire universe.
Right.
You're the chosen one. And, like once you have a good structure and a good template like that, it's really just a matter of, swapping out the details. And like I said, is it going to be like best ever sales letter? No, but it's going to be like 80/20. Like
And it's
you
gonna be
could,
done.
yeah, you could wring more out of it, but yeah, done is better than none. And, like I just like to get people over their fear of it, because like you're not trying to be Vladimir Nabokov, you're just fucking writing advertising, man. It's not it's not art, it's
Yeah.
not literature.
You're not saving
It's
the manatees.
yeah,
Well, in some
it
cases you might be, but what I mean.
right.
Yeah.
I could write a letter for that.
Now that's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that is some one angle, I would say, that has brought controversy into your life, perhaps from other
Yeah.
copywriters. But I mean, another good example of that, I mean, of course, is Stephen Pressfield. If you
Uh-huh.
read his books, and he talks about, in the War of Art and so forth, and in his latest, well, I don't know what his latest one is, but one most recent about golf, he talks about how he ripped off the Bhagavad Gita for the structure, and then basically, the Legend of Bagger Vance is the Bhagavad Gita, you know.
I did not actually know that,
Yeah.
but now that you say it, having read the Bhagavad Gita and watched Bagger Vance, I totally see it. I
So,
totally see it.
so this is everywhere, and and some very famous writers have copied, other famous writers in an effort to.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting you mention that in particular, because like the Bhagavad Gita is, like, for those who don't know, it's a Hindu, uh like, I guess you would call it like a religious story, but it's like an adventure story set during a war, and there's like princes and gods having conversations about the nature of the universe while riding in a chariot across a battlefield while the war rages around them. And it's like there's a reason those stories have survived history, especially like it's passed from person to person in pre-literate or generally illiterate cultures.
Right.
So it's polished like a stone in a river. There's nothing in there that is not central to the story, and what is there is part of what makes it transferable. So like I think of it as like it's an evolved story. It has survived the environment of human consciousness across the ages that would normally kill shitty stories. These have evolved to be robust.
Right.
And like we're essentially talking about mutations. Bagger Vance is a mutation of the mimetic virus that the Bhagavad Gita is also of. Like they're the same DNA, but they're different
Yeah.
in detail. So when you look at stuff like that, especially these hero tales, right? So like you're a primitive proto ape tribal culture. How do they decide who the leader is? Like what is that leader doing that makes people see, okay, well, he's the tribal chief. That guy is the tribal shaman. Like the shaman is the key, because like the tribal chief is just like the strong one, the one who will bash your head in if you don't do what he says. But the shaman is the guy who's like, well, I'm not strong, but I want what that guy has, so how can I scheme that out of people? And that's the guy who starts inventing the stories. That's like, oh yeah, well, it rained real bad and our village got struck by lightning. It's probably because of something you did. But I'm in good with the spirit, so if you bring me food and make me not have to work, I'll put in a good word. So
Ta-da!
that guy started out as being like the first salesman, but like what was it about that guy that made people believe him and see him as an authority? And it's like, I've talked about it before in the sense of superheroes. So like your audience needs to know what your powers are. They need to know what your secret identity is, and they need to know your reason for being a hero.
Right.
And if you have those three things and they make sense to your audience, that's sort of like what they're looking for. And what's amazing about it, there's this peculiar thing. I need to come up with a clever name for it so that it's easier for people to attribute to me. But it's this observation, and I make it particularly about Spider-Man, because the trick with Spider-Man is that Spider-Man as a hero and to the world that he lives in, they know nothing about who he is other than what he's doing when he's Spider-Man. But you, as the reader, are in on his secret that he's just a wimpy teenage nerd who can't get the girl, who gets beat up by bullies.
Right.
He's an orphan again. I don't know. Both my parents are alive. I'm really screwed over in that department. So he's it's got this thing where like the audience knows a secret about Spider-Man that his world doesn't know. Now, when you look at that guru, mentor, advisor figure, there's that same separation where, like, hey guys, I want to talk to you about some things that I did in my business today. And in your mind, you're thinking, like, that's his superhero stuff that he does over there. And those people don't know that he and I are friends and he's honest with me. Like, this is the secret identity part where I'm sharing with you the behind the scenes stuff. But for some reason the audience doesn't understand that, like, you're not watching a confessional about a business that exists in some other area. You're watching a commercial for the only business there is.
Right.
Right? Like I'm not talking to you about a business that I did somewhere else. I'm selling you on me as an expert by telling you this. This is my advertising. So that guru structure there where it's like, well, back to the shaman. Well, guys, I was, ate a bunch of mushrooms and sat in my yurt for a while, and the storm god says, you guys just got to give me the hotties in the village just for a little. I don't want to marry them. I just want to hang out with them, eat some more mushrooms, and we'll see what happens. You can have them back
That's right.
afterward.
Now it's. Do you think you sort of seem to be a lightning rod for, like we said earlier, for a bit of controversy with other, maybe one in particular I can think of, established copywriters.
Yeah.
But is that something is that just your nature? Have you always been like that? Or is that part of the cultivation of?
It's a little bit of both. It's one of those things where it is in my nature to be argumentative, um, especially when I know I'm right,
Right.
which people are like, you always have to be right. And I'm like, no, but not about everything. But the reason we're arguing about this thing right now is because I know I'm right.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
if we're talking about something else, like underwater, basket weaving,
Right.
I would defer to superior opinions. But on this thing, I'm arguing because I'm certain. But yeah, so it was one of those things where like copywriting has a fandom, and there's like guys who are like the high muckety mucks who everybody looks up to. And it's usually copywriters who are working, who manage to, get on stages and create products for themselves. But historically, those guys are all cut from the same cloth, sort of. Like in my mind, it's like you're wearing a brown blazer, you're wearing aftershave, you got a pinky ring, you went to college, you're in a fraternity, you drink scotch during the day. Very, very like 70s businessman idea in your mind of what that type of copywriter is. Tinted glasses,
Right. Yeah,
that kind of thing.
that's a big one too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like smoking a cigar, typically, like if I was going to make an avatar of that guy, that's like the copywriter's copywriter of previous eras. Now, the trick with those guys is they came from an era that predates the internet. So for you to write an advertisement and for someone to invest in running it to see if it's good or not, it's tens of thousands of dollars at a minimum for printing and paper and stamps and postage, and like it's got to perform or else. So this whole thing of like you got to apprentice and you got to spend 15 years in the trenches and you got to beat these controls, like I get it. And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like okay, yeah, like
Yeah.
and I get it, that you are absolutely right, that's the way it had to be done back then. Today though, for like $100, you can find out if your ad works or not on social media and tweak it in real time, and you don't have to reprint shit. like
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's zero cost to fix it, and like the bar to entry has been lowered, and the teachers of the field have not met where the bar actually is now with the advent of the internet. It's so much lower and easier to try. And I tell people all the time, like there's this old adage that like I think Gary Halbert did it, and I can't ask him unfortunately, but I think he almost did it as a way to get people to stop bothering him.
Right.
But he said, like, here's a stack of famous copywriting letters that won. Go hand copy them. And then when you hand copy all like 50 of them or whatever, then we'll talk. And I feel like that's at least in part like, go away, kid, you bother me. And if someone's that dedicated, at least then, they have the physical chops to actually put some writing in. Because that's another thing. Writing is work. And everybody's like, oh, I can write. Like, can you sit there for 8 hours and write like uninterrupted, like as a job? Can you? I can,
Right.
but it's because I like it. Like, it doesn't feel like work to me, but it's work. It's a grind. So I frequently tell people that advice is bullshit, to go copy old letters, because the reason back in the day you would have to do that is because you wanted somebody to drop like 30, 40 grand on a campaign that you wrote. So you better know what you're talking about, because like you might not only not get paid, you might bankrupt that company if you fuck them up.
Right.
But today it's like it's not like that. Like, you're better off if you want to learn copy, instead of handwriting some dead letter to copy it. Look at it, find the structure, find the product that you can sell right now as an affiliate or whatever, and publish it online for incredibly cheap, almost free, and then throw some traffic at it and see what happens. You'll learn more doing that than you will trying to like rewire your brain handwriting old shit. Now, maybe there's something to, like, they say, oh, it's the muscle memory. It's like, well, do you compose your ads longhand? No? Okay, well, then copying it longhand will do nothing for your muscle memory. Like, you don't learn to swing a golf club by swinging a baseball bat. They're
That's
different.
right. That's right.
So I don't know, that's just one of those things where like there's a lot of old chestnuts in the old guard copywriting world that just don't apply in today's industry. And it's the same thing to where like if I didn't have tens of millions of dollars of results from the work that I've published for my clients, maybe someone could say, I don't know what I'm talking about. But as it is now, I got a real Kanye West kind of attitude about it. Like, you can't tell me nothing about it, because it's like,
Because I did
yeah,
it.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, I'm not calling you a liar when you say that you need all of this background to do what you do. I'm saying not everyone does. And I guess the reason it irks some people is if they invested in their life in that way to discover that they didn't have to, is probably not fun for them. But like, I get it. I get why they're mad, but that doesn't make what I'm saying not true.
You're right. Now, I found it very interesting because I purchased your copywriting retirement program back in the
Right.
years ago.
That was
And,
before I even started the Cult of Copy. That was like the first ever training I did.
right. And you called it the copywriting retirement because you were not taking any more clients.
Right.
But did you, I mean, when you decided to do that program, what I found interesting too is, of course, you labeled it like retirement, which is a hot button for people already.
Yeah.
But also that you systematized, and you briefly mentioned it earlier, you systematized it, how you wrote your copy for clients, for yourself, so that you wouldn't go nutty,
Yeah.
blank page all the time. And I think that's something that is a real takeaway from this interview too, is like how that then evolved, of course, into your products. But maybe talk a little bit about that a bit more.
Sure. That it's funny because that's another. It's hilarious because here's a hypocrisy in the old guard mentality of copywriting. They'll say shit like, templates don't work, formulas don't work. You really need to be a genius and expert at this.
Right.
But at the same time, they're telling you to go hand copy old letters. Like,
Right.
do formulas work or do they not? Like, which is it? Like, if it didn't work, what good would copying old shit do?
Right.
Like, what exactly am I supposed to be learning from hand copying winning letters if formulas don't work? Like, so that idea that, like, it's got to be art, you have to be creative. Like, I don't know if that's a holdover in that many copywriters, many people who end up in advertising in general are failed artists. Like, I'm just going to do this so I can write all day and eventually I'll have my novel and then I'll quit. Like,
Yeah.
I look at it as like, I'm like consider furniture. Like, I'm not Chippendale. I'm not making one of a kind art furniture. I'm fucking Sears putting cabinets in. And I got a template and I'm going to measure it and they're going to fit and you're going to feel like it's custom. But I'm installing 1,000 of these cabinets this year and they're the exact same fucking cabinets that everybody else has. Just sort of,
Yeah.
Lego type rearrangement in a different way.
Right.
But like, the client doesn't need art. Like, they need results. And like, if I have a formula that I know gets result, why would I reinvent the wheel just to satisfy my artistic ego about it? Like, it's it's less work for me to use the template, and that's what they say. Oh, the client is paying you all this work, and you're using a template, and you're not putting in the hours. I'm like, the client wants the result, and if you can deliver the result for a return on the investment they gave you, where they make more than they spent, like, what else is there? Like, how can they not be happy with that if that's what you can deliver? And templates are great because, like I said, if you're trying to reinvent the wheel every time for no purpose other than to say, "Oh, I'm a creative genius," you might be able to do it one time, you might be able to do it 10 times, but you're gonna choke one time. It just happens. Like there's a reason ancient Greeks attributed creativity to the muse,
Right.
because that helped them feel better about failing. You have somebody to blame when
Yeah.
when it just doesn't click, it just doesn't happen. So I made these templates when I went freelance with the idea that, like, at my job, and when it was a day job, I had like months to work on a project because the company was good and planned ahead and we knew what was coming. So I could work on things at leisure. But when you're freelancing, a guy hires you and he's like, "Yeah, we're launching in 2 weeks." So like, I don't have that luxury. So I need to know, like, in order of priority, what are the chunks of information I need, and what are the order I need to put them in to have a draft. So like here's another thing. Like if you have a template, like my templates are based on mind maps for people who know what those are. So it's like it looks like a little tiny list of things, but then when you click each one, it opens up for you to fill in all this information that goes in that part. If you're trying to write a letter creatively and you're just writing in order and you get stuck, then other shit that you could be able to write is not getting addressed because you're stuck and you're not there yet. But if you have a template, a map of the entire thing, you get stuck on like the intro, then you just like, okay, well, I'm not feeling creative about the product. Let me go write the guarantee. Let me go write the close. Like there's mechanical parts of it that are not like don't require artistry. And what I found is that when you have a template and you can bang out a decent draft very quickly, then you have all the time in the world before the deadline to think up better, more creative things to insert. But at least you have a finished draft. Copywriting is tricky because people think they're a writer and they think it's like it's art, and it's not. Like you are a service provider. You can't like to go back to installing cabinets. The guy installing the cabinets from Sears that the guy paid for can't be like, I don't know, man. Like it's just not looking right. I can't do it. I'm gonna come back later.
Right.
I know I said we'd install them today, but I'm not gonna be able to finish it. I'm just not feeling it. You know, like you have a product that you've been contracted to deliver and you need to deliver it. Now, if you have a formula that's been proven again and again, you can rely on it, you can deliver it, you know that no matter what, when that deadline rolls around, you will have a decent draft. And if you get enough time and inspiration hits, it might even be excellent. But it's going to, at least at a minimum, be decent and it's going to work. And if you know your markets and you know that this client is going to be able to drive the right kind of traffic, you know that they're going to make more money than they paid you. And like that's all you need to sleep at night.
Yep. To look yourself in the mirror. Yep. No, I think it's you're making very important points about it not being this artistic. I mean, parts of it are,
Yeah.
of course, like you pointed
I
out.
mean, I mean it can be,
Yeah.
but like you're not like we're not what's his face on Mad Men, Don Draper, you know?
Right. Right.
We're not Don Draper tortured artists making multi-millions of dollars for Coca-Cola's budget, right? Like some of us are, but like I mean, a lot of the people in the professional working copywriting world have much smaller businesses as clients, mom and pops, you know, like they don't need creativity. They don't need artistry. They don't, you know, like the ad doesn't need to make their customers laugh. You know, if the failure that they're having at getting new leads for their like local exterminator service is that they don't appear competitive in the marketplace, there's no reason to pick them over anyone else. Like you don't need an ad that's going to bring a mother to tears.
Right.
You know, like you just need an ad that delivers the value proposition. And that's a pretty standard mechanical output. So there's a formula for that. You tell people what it is, and then you put it out there and see how people react, and then you adjust as you need.
No, I think it's true, and I think it was Eugene Schwartz. There was a famous video of him, I think at Rodale, where he gave a talk where he talked about how copy is assembled; it's not written.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and there's a guy who's everyone looks up to, I think, in copywriting, saying it himself. So it's
yeah.
funny.
And he's another one who said, like, he told a story in an interview that I heard once where a guy hired him to write this piece. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. I'll have it in 2 weeks. And he said, before we even shook hands to say goodbye after that meeting, I knew what the hook was. And I didn't need 2 weeks to do it. But he
Right.
doesn't need to know that.
Yeah, and I think I've heard Dan Kennedy say similar things before too in some of his products.
Right. But the trick is, like, that's smart. That's the way a long-term service provider thinks. Because you won't always be able to do that. So you don't give someone the expectation that you immediately have the proper idea for them. You give yourself the buffer, not for this time, but so that the next time that guy comes back and you do need 2 weeks, he's not mad because he thinks it only takes a day.
That's the end of part 1 of my interview with Colin Theriot from the Cult of Copy. Tune in next week where Colin and I reveal how to charge higher fees as a freelance copywriter.